Today we're going to talk about just a whole, miscellany of things, whole group of different things that came up this year, Pesach Tavshin Pei Daled. Most of them are not particularly related to this year, a little bit, and just for what they're worth. And the first is, it's not really, most people don't even know this, but the CRC certifies a company called Flavor Chem. It's a flavor company. They make a lot of the flavor chemicals, flavors that are used by Pesach by lots of different companies. Pesach flavors are always made with hashgacha tmidis, and the mashgiach that we had for that, who'd been doing that for several years, Rabbi Levi Lando. Unfortunately, he had a medical emergency during this year, not related to this, to Flavor Chem, and he passed away, did not make it. So the schos of the flavors that he made should be a schos for him. And since then, someone else has come on, so I just felt that I should mention that. Okay, on to things that are other things. There's two large companies, two large supermarket chains, Kroger and Albertson, and those two chains have talked about making a merger in order to avoid concerns of antitrust concerns that they would own supermarkets, so many supermarkets across the country. Those companies, as part of their arrangement, said that they would sell off hundreds of their stores that they own as a way to make it that they don't have control of particular markets where they have both stores. And a really good example of that is right here in Chicago. It's actually, technically it's in Skokie, but servicing this Chicago community, there's a Jewel that's right near the Chicago community, which has a lot of kosher products. A lot of people go there, and that's Jewel is part of Albertsons. And then there's Mariano's, which is part of Kroger, just a couple blocks away, also, which has a certain amount of kosher products, and consumers go there. But these two supermarkets definitely compete with each other for regular groceries, and one of those would be sold off as a way of showing that they're not going to be, cornering the market in this area. The company who's going to be buying many or all of these stores that will be sold off is a company called CNS, a company that's owned by Jewish people, and that therefore raises concerns of how much of a Pesach for the. Let's say that the Mariano's is going to be sold. I don't know if that's the truth. Let's say the Mariano's is the one that's going to be sold. Then all of a sudden, Mariano's will be owned by a company that's owned by Jewish people. The CNS does have a certain mechiras chametz that they do. There's lots of different questions about mechiras chametz, and particularly for supermarkets like this, and buying and selling on Pesach and things like that. Not for today's discussion, but I'm just mentioning it, that when that happens, it will raise questions about stores that until now were always assumed to be owned by non-Jewish people. They were owned by Kroger's. It's a publicly traded company that doesn't particularly have Jewish ownership. And all of a sudden, we would now have new questions about ownership of different supermarkets. As it stands now, it appears that because until the government approves this merger, or until the courts approve this merger of these two supermarket chains, that sale will not go through. In other words, the sale is dependent on getting approval for the merger in the first place. So for now, it appears that this concern is not yet real. But it is something that potentially is coming in the future, again, depending on how things work out with the government and courts, etc., and how this whole merger plan plays itself out. Okay, now let's move on to some questions about matzah. What the actual questions about matzah itself, I'm going to talk about in a separate presentation about matzah in general. And that is to say that I was able to be this year at five different hand matzah bakeries. And some things came up. I'm going to talk about that separately, about the difference between one brand of matzah and the next, like what the difference is and what makes one better than the other from a Kashrus, from a halachic perspective. But I'm going to talk about things actually that are separate from that. And actually, two issues that came up having to do with Hafrashas challah that are particular to matzah bakeries. And that is like this. There's most matzah bakeries spend months and months baking matzah for everybody, but as it gets closer to Pesach, there are groups of people who come in and they make what they call a chaburah. They want to make the matzahs to their own standards. They think that they could be more particular than than the bakery might do all the time. They'll have extra people watching. They'll have extra people rolling. Whatever they choose to do that they feel like they do it better, or they want to do. The Rosh says you should be involved yourself in the making of the matzahs. Whatever reason why the chaburah chooses to do that. But the rules with these chaburahs is that let's say there's this many people in the chaburah, and each person gets the plan is we're going to make 200 pounds of matzah, let's say, and each person is going to get this many matzahs to take home. So usually most people are taking home a significant amount of matzah, but not necessarily, particularly when it comes Erev Pesach. So Erev Pesach matzahs are, in very high demand for those who want those who think that's better. And there are situations when there's a chaburah comes in, and each person in the chaburah is just going to walk away with 1 pound of matzah. That's the arrangement, that they're only going to have 1 pound of matzah. And the question is whether you should do Hafrashas challah for that batch of matzahs. And the question is as follows: when you make matzah, the next point isn't actually not so relevant, but I'll say it anyhow. When you make matzah, the Shulchan Aruch says you should have less than a shir challah when you knead the dough. In fact, that's what happens in hand matzah bakeries. It doesn't happen in machine matzah bakeries, but it happens in hand matzah bakeries. So what happens? But even so, when you finish baking, they are mafresh challah. Why are they mafresh challah? Because there's a tzir of sal. They take all the matzahs and put them together, and they put many pounds of matzah together, and they do hafrashas challah. And the reason why that's done is because if a person at home, they were not mafresh challah, because it wasn't chai when you mix the flour and water together, but if later on that person will get together and put many pounds together, if he would do tzir of sal, like in his house, he just put them all into a box, then it would be chai and challah. So the mafresh challah. Now that actually is not so relevant to the question I'm about to say, and the question is as follows. I'm just mentioning how it happens, but it's actually not particularly relevant, and that is, there's a rule. If you make a batch of dough that has the shir challah in it, but the plan is that this dough will be, after you bake it, you're going to separate it, and each person will not get a shir challah. Then the din is, it's called an isa hasui l'chalik. This dough will not have a shir challah in it. Later on, then you're not chayiv to do hafrashas challah. Now, there's a very big exception to that rule, and that is if it's possible that the isa that's hasui l'chalik, this will be divided, will come back together, and someone will have a shir challah, then you're chayiv. So, for example, if you have you make many rolls and you plan on giving that to different people, but it's possible that one person will get enough of the rolls that they'll be chayiv and challah, or it's possible that you won't have enough people to give them to, and you'll keep them all yourself, and you'll have a tziruf again. So then, it is chayiv and challah. So the only time isa hasui l'chalik is applicable is when this isa will permanently, we know with confidence that it will be muchulk, it'll be separated, and it will never come back to being a shir challah. Well, seemingly, this is what the question that was brought up to me is, this is an example when the chaburah has it, that each person gets only 1 pound of matzah to take home. So if I'm only getting 1 pound of matzah to take home, I take a pound, you take a pound, the next guy takes a pound, there's no way that that's going to ever come back together to be a shir challah. It's not like one person might walk away with 5 pounds of matzah. I mean, if that was true, if there's one person, let's say the boss, the guy who arranged it, who's going to walk away with 5 pounds, no problem. Then we could be mafresh challah. It's not us the chalik. Or if we end up baking too much and there's going to be leftovers and someone will walk away, then it's not isur l'chalik. But if it's arranged, if it's so organized, and each person actually walks away with 1 pound of challah, seemingly that's an isa hasui l'chalik, and it's not b'chayim challah. That was someone raised this point. It seems like it's accurate. I'm just mentioning it because I hadn't thought of it beforehand, and I suspect others haven't either. Another question that has to do with hafrashas challah that has to do with baking matzah. This is for machine matzah. And then it's like this. The Shulchan Aruch says that nowadays when dough is tameh, the dough that we make from bread or challah or anything like that, you should not be mafresh when you add the water, but rather it's toiv to wait until the flour and water mix together into being a nice batch. And what that means is that really pshat is like this. Really, we hold that the chiv of challah, chiv to be mafresh challah happens already as soon as you mix the flour and water together. I'm sorry. Some hold that midaraisa you're not chayiv in hafrashas challah until you mix the flour and water together. I'm sorry, until you make it into a ball, into a dough. Just mixing the flour and water is not enough to be chayiv. Some hold like that. Now, you're allowed to do the hafrasha even when you add the water already. You're allowed to do the hafrasha even earlier. But midrabanan, Chazal said, don't do the hafrasha earlier. Wait until it's mixed together. I'm sorry. Midrabanan, Chazal said you should specifically do it at the earlier time once you're allowed to. And the thinking is because this way the piece that's separated has kedusha and has to be kept as tahar. So you want to make sure that it's separated as quickly as possible from the rest of the dough, so we can be careful about this part to keep it tahar. So that's the reason why usually we mafresh challah as soon as you mix the flour and water together. However, since nowadays, that's why I started with the chaburah. Since nowadays the dough is already tummy, it's going to be tummy no matter what. We're not going to treat with tahir anyhow, so we should wait till the better time, which is wait until it's actually a ball. It's become a dough rather than just flour and water mixed together. And this is relevant to spelt matzah, spelt machine matzah. That's because when you make most matzah, as I mentioned, you mix less than a shir challah in the mixing bowl. So by the time you do hafrasha, it's already baked into a matzah. It's like way past it became into a dough. But in machine matzah, they use more than a shir challah. The mixing bowl has more than a shir challah in it. And what usually they would do is, as soon as they mix the flour and water together, right away someone will be mafresh challah so that they don't forget. They're not doing it because of the Shulchan Aruch reason to do it because of the tumah. They do it so they don't forget. But so by spelt, it appears it takes more effort to get that and to actually mix into a good dough, and therefore you should wait until it's actually mixed together well before you do Hafrashas challah, rather than doing it right away. Okay, let's move on to some things that are more actually directly Pesach related, not just Hafrashas challah related. One thing is like this. Questions come up a number of times. This year we put a little more effort into it, and that is, are you allowed to use flour food on Pesach? Flour food are these little packets that come when you buy flours in the store for Shabbos or Yontif or just a random Tuesday. They come in this little packet, and you pour this like powder into the vase with the water, and then it's supposed to be good for your flours, helps them stay fresh for longer. And the question is, what about on Pesach? Are you allowed to use that or not? So turns out there are two main manufacturers of those flour packets, those little packets, two main companies that make them. We were in touch with them and tried to understand a little of what goes into there. And it turns out that those packets are made of basically of sugar or dextrose, some kind of a almost completely. That's all it is. That's what helps the plant grow better. Citric acid and a preservative, and that keeps other bacteria from growing in this water that you just put sugar into, which of course would attract bacteria. So basically, it's sugar and citric acid with a little bit of a preservative in it. Now, most people who look at this packet say, "Oh, I'm sure you can't eat this stuff." But first of all, just from hearing the ingredients, you would guess that you could eat it because basically it's just sugar and citric acid. Just probably has a lemony taste to it. But in fact, we did a taste test on it. We mixed it into water according to the instructions. I tasted it, and some other people tasted it, including Rav Reese, who did not think that it was pugum. And not only did not seem that it was pugum, but also you have to bear in mind that we followed the instructions. We put one pack into the amount of water that it said you're supposed to do, which is not what people do. People put them with more or less water, which is to say is any taste that it has to it may well be more or less diluted. And overall, Reese did not think that it was particularly pugum to it. So that at first you might think that's a concern, but it turns out that these two manufacturers, one manufactures it in the United States, the other one makes it in Colombia. Their headquarters are in Europe, where these types of things might be chametzik, but in fact they're making it in Colombia, where it's less of a concern. And the truth is, because of that, the dextrose or the sugar that they're using, which is the main thing, and even the citric acid, it's really unlikely that this thing is chametz. It's possible. There is a chance it's chametz, but it's rather unlikely. And bear in mind that we're not eating this. No one's, that we know of, is eating this flour food. The flour food is just there they're owning it, and they're having hanaf from it, but no one's actually eating it. So chumras that we have to be extra careful about foods that we don't want to eat chametz on Pesach don't apply in this case. So Rabbi said we should do the following. He said, if you put it into your vase before the time of the Isra Hanaf starts on Erev Pesach, then it's okay. At that point, the chances are that it's not chametz in the first place. Once it's mixed into the water in the vase, it's bottle. The amount, anything that would be in there would be bottle. There's no chayzer veneer and these kind of mixtures, so it's okay, and you shouldn't worry about it. He recommended that you not use it if you bought it after the time of the Isser Hana on Erev Pesach, whatever that time is, at sometime in the morning, or on Pesach itself. You should not use it, and not take it from the store and not put it into your vase because of the chance that it is chametz. So it's a fine thing to do to avoid, avoid using it once it comes already at the time when you're not allowed to have enough from chametz. Okay, another thing is. We did a little more poking around about steamers this year. We've always told people, that we only recommend a specific steamer, a Tornado VS4, which is a rather expensive machine, and too expensive, but it does the job, and if it's done correctly, just owning the machine is not enough. You have to know what you're doing, but it does work if it's done correctly, which is to say is it puts out water that's roischem temperatures. And so not only is it the right temperature, but it's also what on the counter will actually be liquid. You'll see water on your counters, which is what you need. We can't kasher just with the steam itself. But people have asked about all kinds of other steamers to know whether they can or can't use them. So a couple of different things happened. One person who wanted to use a steamer, who couldn't afford to buy this machine, wanted to rent one of them from a Home Depot type store. He wanted to rent the machine. And the machine that he wanted to rent wasn't going to cost him much for the little time he needed for kashering. Excuse me, but it seemed like it was a very expensive machine. And the details of the way the machine is presented by the manufacturer sounded like it would be a great job. It was supposed to put water on the counters. It was supposed to be temperatures like 300 degrees. It sounded like overall sounded like it was going to be a good machine and durable and capable of doing what it had to do. So, in fact, the person rented. I said, "Listen, let's try it out and see what happens." They rented it just for an hour or whatever, just to see how it works. In fact, the water came out at 120 degrees, and what came out was like 120 degrees. And on the surface that we put it on, there was barely water. There was like nothing doing. So here, it seemed like it was going to be successful, and it was a flop. It didn't work at all. Then they tried other machines that were not nearly as expensive. They found ones that actually did do the trick. So, as a rule, better machines are going to do a better job, but by no means is that for sure. And lav dafka does a person have to have the best machine, but lav dafka on the other hand, having an expensive machine is going to do the trick. It's sort of it's really you say the word hit or miss. You have to really know what you're doing and get the right machine. Of course, once you have the machine, you have to do it right. You have to do it slowly and methodically. You have to really know what you're doing. And even a machine itself, sometimes they need maintenance, and they need to be taken care of and used properly. But if it's done right, it can be used for kashering. If it's not done right, don't use it. Okay. Last thing to talk about is there's been lots of movement for people to be carbon sensitive, for people to use renewable resources, to people to stay away from petroleum products, a lot of different angles of similar issues. And two things that we noticed this year, one is that in one of the local supermarkets here has biodegradable bags for putting like your fruits and vegetables into there. I might be saying it wrong, or maybe they're compostable, or maybe it's both, I don't remember. And some of these companies tell you that they make it out of wheat. That's one issue. That's one thing and people question. Well, maybe they're a concern of chametz. Related to that was you can buy straws and floss picks that they tell you that are made from wheat, from straw wheat. I know straws and made from straw wheat. So the question is, are these things okay? Is this a chametz concern? And we don't believe that it is a concern. And there's two good reasons for that. The first is that it doesn't take much to guess, but you could try it yourself. We did to bite into this thing and say, "Does this thing edible?" And it's pretty obvious that it's not edible. We didn't try tasting the floss picks. That was a little past us, but we did try the biodegradable bags, the compostable bags, and they taste like any other bag, which is not edible. And the reason is because, in essence, they're taking this wheat product or this other renewable resource, and essentially they're turning it into plastic. From the chemical side, it's very similar to regular plastic that you have out there, and it tastes like that. Not such a surprise. It looks like plastic. It actually tastes like plastic also. Now that's one reason why it's not a concern for Pesach, and the second reason is is that some of these manufacturers are clear, but even the ones who are not, I have a feeling it's the same thing, and that is when they make these products out of straw. Some of them are pretty straightforward, and they tell you, no, we made it out of straw. So when they say they make it out of wheat, they say make it out of wheat straw. What's going on? What's wheat straw? Wheat straw means is the wheat plant has the kernels, the grains that we eat. That's what we make into pizza and cookies and matzah and bread and everything like that. That's what we always consider the edible part. Then there's the stalk, what we call the straw, the stalk part of it, and the other parts that are not edible. Well, people have found ways to turn those essentially into plastics. Whatever the chemistry is, not so relevant to us, but they've found ways to turn these things into plastic-like materials. So when they're making these items out of wheat, they're not making it out of the part of the wheat that become chametz, not making it out of the kernels, the grains, out of the part that become chametz. Those parts are saved for making things like pretzels and cookies. They're using it out of what would be considered garbage or animal feed, the other parts that aren't, and that's what they're using for this. And those items aren't chametz. It's not chametz to eat the straw that wheat is made out of. It's chametz if you have the kernels and they get mixed with water. Now you have chametz, but the stalk of the plant is not chametz at all, and that's what these things are being made out of. Therefore, they do not pose a chametz concern. Chag Kashrus, everybody. Have a good Yom Tov.